Hello, Top. Are
Ooh,
you there,
hello,
Tobbs?
Brendan.
All right.
All
Um,
right. So today I am joined by Brendan, aka our senior environment artist. Okay, Brendan, it is every stream, but every stream you have proved me right. Every time I set in on one of your streams, I learn something new every time. Usually multiple things. So I'm always quite excited to stream with you. Thank you for carving out some time of your busy schedule. In all honesty, I would have Brendan stream far more often, but our artists are very, very busy. So thank you so much.
True story. Yep.
All right. So what are we working on today, Brendan?
Well, we've had this scene that we kind of been working on over the last few videos, and I see no reason to stop because there's always more that
Yes.
can be done. Um,
Awesome.
so, yeah, as a recap, we've kind of built this outdoor foresty environment. It's fantasy based. We've got a couple points of interest. We built this little shrine with a sword in it and a beam of light going into the sky. And then we started work a little bit on a dungeon entrance, or an underground dungeon last time. So I was thinking maybe this time we could work on that dungeon entrance a little more. We could also, something I was thinking would be fun, would be change the lighting around. Um,
Oh.
we've kind of been referencing off and on this image that I found from a artist on Twitter named the artist Julian, at the artist Julian. We've kind of been using this as some inspiration, and one thing that is dramatically different between our little concept image here and the scene we've been working on is the lighting and the time of day. And I don't think anybody, well, I certainly have not gone into detail on making your own custom sky yet.
Oh, awesome.
So maybe it would be fun to tweak around some of those parameters. Uh, I now have this reputation of always introducing a new concept, right? So
No pressure.
maybe
You just
that's
have to,
something new that we could work on today.
yeah, live up to
Um,
your own
mhm.
own greatness.
Yeah, but first maybe let's work on our little dungeon entrance a little bit because we kind of did a splash dash last minute haphazard take on it last time, and I feel like it could be definitely be better. Um, really quick, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab from our sky. I
All
just
right.
want to be able to see it better, so I'm just going to turn the sun around real quick, so it's actually pointing on that area. That's a little better. Um, something which we might also want to do, maybe not right now, but thinking about this from a gameplay perspective, we want to make sure that the player actually notices it up in the hill there. So just putting more light on it is one way of doing it. Of course, we're just pointing the sun straight at it, which means everything is kind of illuminated the same. So it might be better to kind of highlight it with some kind of key light, maybe like a fire, a torch, or like a magic glow or something. But we can get to that. For now, I just wanted to be able to see it better. So I'm going to grab, this is our group, which represents, yeah, this is our gateway. Actually, you know what? Really quick, I want to clean this hierarchy up a little bit because we did just throw a lot of stuff in Slapdash at the end last time. We have anybody in chat? I think it's
Ooh,
probably a little
we
early for questions, but
do actually already have a question.
okay.
Cymark asks, in the future, will you be able to modify collision boxes like foliage?
Um, as as to modifying the actual collision of the imported meshes, that I would be very surprised if we were able to add that as a feature to Core. Something about the fact that Core is always running in real time, and there's some things that just do not change at real time. But you can always make an object non-collidable and then make your own collision out of spheres or pretty much
Oh.
any object in Core, and then make those invisible. I could just grab this pedestal piece and say collision force off, and then if I wanted it to be a cube as the collision, I could throw that in there.
Whoa. That is like the best hack right there. I was
Yeah.
thinking like, oh, maybe you could like use triggers, but then they have to be networked, and you
Mm-hmm.
can't have like 5 million networked objects for foliage.
Yep. So then I've forced off the visibility. So it's not perfect. What would be, if you could actually edit the actual collision, you would always get better results because now you'll notice that my feet since they don't perfectly, they're kind of sliding into the geometry of the piece underneath. As far as just walking around it though, like that totally works as a hack. With real collision, that's how we get things like the actual collision of these stair pieces is a ramp. But we have something called IK, inverse kinematics, on the characters, and the IK actually collides with the actual geometry of the piece, which is how the feet always land on the steps instead of this example here where they're kind of hovering a little bit. Yeah, so technical there, but yeah, there it's not perfect, but it is a solution. Yeah, so I just want to group all these really quick. I'm going to group these first because if I ever come back to this, it'd be nice to have the pivot right in the middle. So, this is actually something worth mentioning. When you create a group, there's kind of some secret behind the scenes rules that determine where the origin of the group is. I don't know how well we surface this in the documentation, but it's worth mentioning that by default, if you have snapping turned off, whatever you put in the group, like I'm going to grab these three objects and I'm going to just group them right now. It will put the origin of the group at the common center of the origins of all the objects within the group. So it picked this point and it picked this point where the manipulator is. So it's picking those 3 points and finding the shortest distance between them all, and that's where it's placing the origin of the group. So this is really useful. This is a special case because these objects have their origins kind of in weird spots. Origin, pivot, that's the same thing. If I'm using words interchangeably that people aren't quite understanding. But since I know that,
so as the environment artist, do you decide where like an object's pivot is?
we do. Yes, when we first add them to the catalog, we decide that. And that's something that I want to talk about actually today also is how we got the tile sets set up with very specific pivots. But we'll get to that in a minute. So anyways, because I have snapping turned off, it tried to use the most exact center of those 3 objects, the 3 objects pivots that I mentioned. So you're going to get these weird decimal values as the actual origin of the group. And then if you happen to try moving it with snapping turned on again, it's going to jump a little bit because then it's going to try and jump to the nearest grid point. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
However, let's go back and say I did not make this group. Or revert here. If snapping was turned on when I hit Control G, which I'm going to do right now, it will always round. It will round to the nearest grid point that your grid snap settings are set to.
Okay, this explains so much. Because I have noticed sometimes I'm like, oh, it'll be like, I'll have the pivot right where I want it in the group, and then I'll be like, okay, now group it, and then it's like, and it moves like a few. Ugh. I'm already learning stuff.
Yep. Right. So now, because we started it with the grid snapping already turned on, that means it's always going to be on the grid when snapped. So I can move it and then I can snap it right back, etc. So yeah, so really, that's something key to know. So I already taught you something. I fulfilled my obligation, and we can just goof off for the rest of the stream. Yeah. So I will often, like when I'm creating a new group, because I know that, I'll pick like a few objects that I know when I group them will give me the pivot that I want. So for instance, that's what I was doing here. I was like, okay, I know these cylinders have a common pivot that's right in the center. I would want the origin of this group to be the center. So I'm just going to grab them. I'm going to leave grid snapping on because I think I'm close to the grid right now. You know what? I'm going to turn grid snapping off. I take that back because just like you said, it jumped a little bit. We saw it jump a little bit. But if I turn grid snapping off and I group them, then the origin is going to be the exact center of these objects. And then I'm just going to grab everything else here, all these stair pieces, and just drag them into the group. I'll call this board a dais. I think that's a dais. I don't know what a dais actually is. It's a round platform.
Whoa.
Close enough, right?
Well, it's like what I
I
was
assume.
picturing in my head, but I don't know if I would be able to give you the definition if asked.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what a dais is.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions yet? Or,
Oh, yes, we have two actually. Koomplow asks, when you select multiple and rotate, does it rotate all of the objects independently?
So it will always rotate around the pivot of the last object selected. So if I grab these two objects and I grab them here, the outer one rotate. They all rotate around a common origin, which is useful if you want to rotate them around their individual axes. If you select multiple and then change a numeric value, um, unfortunately, this is probably a bad example because the z is different for both of these. But say that in that case they will rotate around their own specific origins.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in general, no, they always rotate around last selected. And if you want to swap around where which pivot you're rotating around, if you still hold Shift and click an object that's already selected, it'll move that as the last selected. It'll recognize that as the last selected, and it'll move the origin of the widget to that object's origin. So there's another hack.
Oh, cool.
Another little bit of secret knowledge.
Excellent. And then Flint D asked, is there a way to set the pivot manually? Which I think you just went over, basically using a group to create a new pivot point.
Right. Yeah, we don't yet have a way to move pivots. I say yet because I hope that is something we will have one day. It is something that will make all of these hacks obsolete and a lot more useful. But yeah, I find the best way if you have a specific pivot for a group, just drag out a cube or something. Make a new group of the cube. You know that the pivot of that group is going to be the exact center of that cube, and then drag whatever you want into the group in the hierarchy. That's the workaround. Even if you want to change the pivot of an existing group, you can do that just by do that process and then drag everything from the existing group into the new group, and then it'll have the new group's pivot.
Yes. Yeah. And another question, Koomplow asks, is it possible to scale multiple objects so they keep their relative positions?
Yes, that is.
I think that might be the default action for multiple objects selected while scaling.
No, it looks like they do scale from their own pivots. If they're in a group, I believe they scale outward from the group's pivot, which we can test. But of course, you lose. Yes, so that works. So it's actually a little different behavior from the rotate. Of course, the one unfortunate disadvantage is groups can only be scaled uniformly. And that's just a limitation of the Unreal Engine that we're working with. So, anyway, okay. So we can throw our little light ray effect in there as well. Cool. That's its own thing now. It's just a little more clean of a hierarchy. Didn't want to get it all. Didn't want to muck it all up for the stream. Let's get back to our dungeon entrance. So here we have our dungeon entrance, and something we talked about last time was it's at kind of a weird angle. So before I make any changes to it, the first thing I want to do is actually, I'm just going to, let's see, kind of note down 37 degrees. Remember, it would be pretty easy to remember this or just figure it out again from scratch. But I actually reset the rotation. And then I'm just going to drag it out here so I have a little more freedom to work with it. Just kind of clean up what we did last time, maybe add some more features. But the reason I'm doing this is because the snapping in Core, the grid snapping, tends to be Cartesian, you might say, north, south, east, west. It's always oriented to world space. So we have the ability, if something is rotated, let me just put it back where it is. You can grab an object and you can press T, and that will change the widget so that it's operating in the object's local space, because the object has its own kind of built-in north, south, east, west coordinates. And since this object it's part of a group that has been rotated 37.28 degrees, whatever, as long as we have T selected, then our widget will be rotated that 37.28 degrees. So the only problem is the grid is always going to be world space. So if you start to, going to turn grid snapping off, and I'm just going to kind of move this object back and forth, and you see that it slides exactly like we'd expect. It's maintaining its parallel orientation nature to the group that it's a part of, right? But if I turn grid snapping on, it will move in the direction that we're moving it, but notice it's popping out and going back in and stuff. And that's because it's trying to snap exactly to the world grid. If I throw a cube in here, you can actually see the points that it's trying to snap to almost. Maybe this will work as an example. But yeah, you'll see it is moving exactly 1 meter, 100 centimeters as the grid is snapped. But it's moving that only that distance in the world grid. I hope that makes sense. I think think visually it kind of comes across.
Yeah, I've run across this problem before, and I just never knew what was happening.
Yep.
At least now I know.
Yep. That's what I'm here for, Tasha. Just got to learn you.
Yeah.
So, like I said, to get around that, I'm going to temporarily just kind of move this and rotate it into a neutral north, south, east, west position, and then I can work on it a little more without having to worry about that happening. And the big advantage of this is all of our tile sets, which, well, we'll get to in a minute because I want to start using the tile set to kind of build out this dungeon. But all of our tile sets are designed to work on the world grid. So, any other questions? Well, maybe I'll just kind of work on this a little bit. And
none yet, but folks, if you have them, please ask them. And did I have a question?
Oh yeah, you're perfectly welcome to ask.
I think I forgot, but it will come back to me.
Okay, I don't really have a huge plan here, so I'm gonna riff for a few minutes.
Ooh, awesome.
I'm gonna go straight to the tile set, the fantasy tile set, because that's where I know most of the pieces I'm gonna want to use for this are.
Yeah, what's the increment for the tile sets?
So the tile sets are built. Yeah, this is as good a time as any to get into this. The tile sets are built. Every wall in the tile set is meant to sit in a 8 by 6 meter configuration. So let me get out a cube again so we can see exactly. So yeah, if you were to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 6 tall. And all wall pieces are 8 by 6, and all floor pieces are 8 by 8 or 6 by 6.
And then the grid is increments of the little squares you see, 100?
Yep, exactly. So we have 800 and 600 as our two highest grid settings. And that is not by any means a coincidence, the fact that all of our tile pieces are 800 meters wide as well, and 600 meters tall. So really the best way to start working on a tile set, I would say, is set your grid to 800. And then every tile set piece you drag out is automatically going to snap to a point that is kind of like within the system of the tile set, right? So like I know that this pillar is always going to hit the intersection of a wall and let's see, better example. Why is that not? Oh, because I'm not actually at. There we go. So yeah, I just snapped everything to some multiple of 800, as can be shown if we were to investigate that closely. So yeah, so now everything I drag out should sit somehow. Of course, that pillar has a different pivot, but yeah, should sit perfectly on the tile set. And we can kind of use this to, see, automatically snaps to the edge. And if you assemble a tile set like this, you'll get, for free, you'll get how we meant these things to snap together. We intended there to be a little bit of overlap between all of the pieces. It's just kind of the way the tile set has to be built, is there has to be a little bit of overlap. But if you set your grid to 800 when you start dragging stuff out, you'll get exactly the overlap that we intended. So.
I remember when I was an intern, I was like, oh, I'll like make my own tile set that and like upload it to community content so other
Mm-hmm.
people can use it. And I was just like, I'll just start with like a low poly one, and even that was so difficult because I was like, wait, what the heck do I do with the corners? And then I was
Uh-huh.
like, this is much harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yep. Yep. I'll just finish this out real quick because this is what I was intending to do anyway on the stream for actually building out an interior of the dungeon. So yeah, just by setting the grid to that highest point, it should make it super fast and easy to just start building out something really quick like this. And all of our tile sets are built on this standard. So if for some reason you wanted to suddenly make a hybrid, suburban dungeon,
Oh my gosh. Okay.
you could
I was
just
actually thinking, what if you like entered a dungeon and it was like your grandma's house on the inside
right,
or
yeah.
something?
I don't know why you do that, but these pieces, like I said, they all snap to exactly the same. So
Awesome.
you can reuse. If you did want to use this piece and you wanted it to look like it actually fit in your dungeon, you can just swap out the materials, like I was just doing. I really like this large foundation piece. Oh, here's a trick. If you drag a material onto the hierarchy, on a piece on the hierarchy, it'll replace all the slots on that particular mesh
OMG.
at
This
once.
stream in particular, we're like 22 minutes in and I've already learned like five
It's
things.
the secret knowledge stream. We should rename it. Yep.
Imagine if you streamed more regularly, Brendan. I might just be the most knowledgeable person
Uh huh.
ever.
Uh huh. So
Oh,
yeah.
and then we do have a question from chat. Tron
Mm-hmm.
Volta asks, is it better to make a template with the grid temp walls or use a tile set first?
Make it.
Oh, like the
I'm not
white
sure I
box
followed.
walls.
Oh,
Tron Volta, do you mean the white box walls?
right, the white box. Kind of up to you, depending on what you want to use that template for. Like if you are publishing something to community content and you don't really want to spend a lot of time on the art, but you have some sort of design feature that you want to show off in a tile space, then I think that's what the white box template tiles are best for. That's kind of how each of the frameworks that we have in Core, the default frameworks, when you start them up, that's kind of why we've built them out of the white box tile set, just kind of as a kind of an open invitation to reskin them. But like I said, those pieces, since they even the pieces in the generic white box tile set, they all conform to the same standards that I just listed. So it's very easy to set the grid to 800, like I said, and hopefully in those example levels, I haven't actually verified this, but hopefully in those example levels, all the pieces are on an 800 grid also, and then I'm at 200 right now. Anyways, so yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, Tron Volta, please let us know if that was what you meant.
Yeah. So, all right, let's go ahead and just use this since I made it.
Oh, it was. Oh, good.
Great. So yeah, I'm gonna grab all these. I'm gonna grab the wall. See, I'm just gonna group them, and since I'm on that 800 meter grid still, it puts the grid point of the origin of the group at the nearest 800 meter point. So all this hallway, whatever. So now I'm going to bring the grid down a little smaller because I want to place this a little more carefully with our dungeon entrance here. Just grab everything and move it a little more out and exposed.
I find myself, like when I'm building out things, I like keeping snap grid on for as much as possible until, as you said, the finer details. Is this something you do too?
Absolutely, yep.
Is it a best practice?
I would say that is a good practice for sure.
Okay.
There's always, I'll never say something's best, but it's definitely how I would work.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm just gonna extend this a little bit while we're at it. Already got pillars from the last one, so I'm going to delete these. So yeah, I'm not working at the 800 grid anymore, but anything, basically anything down to 25, your objects will still snap to the grid as intended. You just have to be use a little more finesse when you place them. Let's see. So maybe we want to descend into the mountain. Grab some stairs. You'll notice even the stairs follow the 8x6 configuration, so they will always, if you line them up with a wall, they will always traverse from one corner to the bottom corner to the top corner of a wall in their profile there, if that makes sense.
So we descended deeper into the dungeon.
Let's see. How are we doing on time? Oh, wow, we're almost halfway through already. It's crazy.
I know, it goes by so fast.
Yep.
And I don't know how I feel about it, because I already feel like time is just flying by.
Mm-hmm. No. All right. Now this pillar piece, I know, has a friend. Go to my search here.
May I ask a question?
Yes, you may. Go ahead.
Awesome.
Right ahead.
So what kind of considerations, or I guess what's the differences you take into consideration when you're designing an interior versus an exterior?
So, that's a big question.
Sorry. Please explain
okay.
your entire craft to me.
So things you have to think about when designing an interior. Definitely what camera mode you're using for the player, what perspective is going to influence that a lot. For instance, a third-person environment, which is the default in core, you're always going to want to have a lot of room because the camera is going to be moving around so much. Just looking left and right brings this huge 680 or 180 swing of the camera around. So if it's a really tight environment, you're always going to be running up into the wall and getting, it's going to be shifting its perspective and stuff. This is why, by the way, we've built the tile sets to be so big. It's because we know that third person is default. So we want to make sure that, by default, a one tile wide hallway still has just enough room for the camera to swing around and not really touch the wall, be impeded. This is not so true when you're playing from a first-person perspective, because when you turn the camera in a first-person perspective, you're pivoting right around the origin of the character, right? So the camera's not doing this big wide swing. And then the same thing from like a top-down perspective. You want to think about is the character going to be occluded when they move into spaces that are between the camera and the player. Definitely wider spaces, I would say, for top-down. The other dungeon environment that I'm working on I've actually built in a little script that just removes geometry from, it just turns it off when the player gets too close to it, just to make sure that it's never really impeding the camera. Yeah, it's got a ways to go before it's really functional. But what else? You have a little more freedom to put more detail into an interior environment, I feel, just from a technical limitation, because, when you're in a big outdoor environment like this, there's always going to be way more stuff on screen that's all spread out. And you kind of have to consider that, there's only so much that your game engine can render at once. Whereas if you're in a tiny constrained environment, hopefully your engine is smart enough to occlude all of that stuff out and not render it, which frees up a lot of system resources, and then you can kind of fill the space with more detail. Yeah, I don't know. Other things. There's always other things you have to think about. Player speed and how they can move about the space. Yeah. Yep. So really quick, let's just kind of test out our little hallway that we built here. So now, got all these hallway sections. We had some stairs. I think I'm just going to move them into this group here. And then, oh, I should name this one. Always name your groups so you don't lose them, especially if they're important, like a key piece of art like this dungeon entrance, which again could be much better, but we're already halfway through this stream, and there's other things that we want to talk about today. So the constant conundrum. All right, the cube, that's just our stand-in floor there, so I'm not going to worry about that. So I'm going to grab all these hallways, and I'm going to grab the dungeon entrance last, so I know that I can pivot around the dungeon entrance now when I rotate them. And let's just kind of slot them into place. That looks about right. And wow, that actually matched up pretty well. You can see we're a little bit off.
You just did that flawlessly. I was like, this is like one of those baking shows where it's like everything looks so easy, but when you try to do it yourself, it's like, oh no.
Draw the rest of the owl. So
exactly.
you know what? I'm gonna pretend we didn't just do that, Tasha. I'm gonna mess this up a little bit because I want to demonstrate how I would actually work around this. This is an issue. So I'm gonna really quick. I'm gonna go. Let's see. I'm gonna go to the Optimize tab on the terrain view and grab the Erase tool. And this is just a tool. It exists on the Optimize tab because it actually does. It removes edits that you've made to the terrain, which actually frees up a little more of the memory that's used for the terrain. So I'm just going to kind of remove some of this cave that we carved out earlier. And you could do this using the Sculpt tab as well, but the Sculpt, we would just be filling in with new extra data on top of the terrain, whereas this Erase tool is actually reverting it to the original data of the imported terrain when we made our height map. So it's just a little cleaner, that's all. So let's say we didn't have our dungeon already carved out. Let's do what we did before. We'll grab our hallways and our dungeon entrance and just kind of put it at the 45 there. Let's kind of move it into place. There we go. And then we come inside and we've got this big ugly wall in the way. So now that I have the actual geometry of the dungeon in there, I feel now is the time to actually go in and sculpt a little bit.
The world's smallest dungeon.
Yeah.
So far.
So let's see. I'm going to go to the shape tool for this, and I'm going to change it to a cube. I think that's the way to go. And then I want it to not be jumping around like this so much. So I'm going to hit the advanced settings. Actually, I don't even need to hit the advanced setting. I just need to change the surface to ground. Yeah. So it's aligning. Yeah, it's aligning to the surface of whatever I'm hovering over. I don't want that up. That's not what I want either. Do I need to turn air mode on? I don't know. Okay, let's not use the cube. I changed my mind. Let's just use use the level tool. Actually, I think this actually would be the best way to do this. So I'm going to use the level tool. If you remember, most tools have an alternate mode, and if you hold the alternate key, you can see what that alternate mode does. I don't know why it's not showing. Okay, I had to click in the viewport before it would show. So by default, the level tool, when you click and drag with it, right, it levels out a platform. But with the alt mode, it carves out a shape of this cylinder indicator that we're using. So I'm going to bring the radius down a little bit. And then you can also set a height. And since we know our dungeon is about 6 meters tall, because all the tile sets are 6 meters tall, I'm going to change the height to 6. Which means, if I go in here, find a little bit of the floor. Oof. You know what? First, I'm just going to hide our dungeon entrance. There. Now we can actually see what we're working with. So I'm going to place the cursor right on top of the floor. And I'm going to hold the Alt tool. And I know that it's going to extend exactly 6 meters above the floor. So if I click, should go a little lower, I'm going to grab the actual ground that we've carved out before. Starting to carve away there. So it should carve a space that is just roughly about the same height as our dungeon. That makes
Well, I
sense?
actually kind of like the foliage in there,
And,
even though I know like
you
this
know,
stuff would never grow in the dark.
it does look kind of cool though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I feel like we should have at least a little bit of overgrown something in here, right? Some sort of evil dungeon plants or something. I don't know. Yeah. Our ceiling doesn't look great, but we can fix that. I'll probably let's just hit it with the smooth brush really quick. We kind of got a little bit of the, oh yeah, now it kind of looks like the ground is kind of caving, the ceiling's kind of caving in a little bit there. That's kind of cool, huh?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. I'm going to do that one. Do that a little more, actually. Maybe not that much. So yeah, and then we have to go in, as you mentioned, yeah, probably too much foliage in here, so I'm just going to grab the foliage erase tool, bring our brush size down. There, it's better. And bring our strength up. And, oh, it looks like we accidentally smoothed the floor a little bit, so we can take care of that with the level tool again. Any new questions in chat?
Nope, none yet.
Okay. I'm going to bring the height of the level tool down a little bit so we don't touch the cool ceiling that we made. And then I'm just going to hold Alt, and there we go. Basically painting out the floor level there. Or if I start where you can see how the indicator for the tool adapts to where the cursor is placed. So if I start here, it's going to start a little bit lower, which means I'm actually bringing it under the floor. And then,
Smart.
yeah. And then here's our staircase. So maybe, let's see, I wonder if we can just going to use the surface tool. See if I can just carve it out kind of manually. No, not strength size. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm going to hold Alt just like before, and that does the opposite. Normally the sculpt tool, if you just click it, pushes up the terrain, but if I'm holding Alt, then it's pushing it in. There we got kind of a natural cave.
Awesome.
And, flatten out the bottom of that cave to kind of match the bottom of our stairs here. But not holding Alt this time.
Yeah, I'm really digging the foliage in the cave.
Yeah. Even if it's not natural, if it looks cool, sometimes,
Right?
just roll with it. Yeah, weird cave plants. I'm gonna erase it a little bit. This should all be dirt. Paint in some dirt, which will take a lot of the plants out anyway. Paint our ceiling dirt so it's a little more natural. So yeah, we've got a little bit of an actual dungeon now. At least a first pass. We can come back to and, add some more art and lights and things. But, we should probably have at least some form of treasure to find, right?
Yeah.
There we go. There's our little treasure.
Oh, teeny tiny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if anybody knows that there's this basic chest template that you use that has some built-in scripts where you can have it. It will, let's see, if I run up to it in play mode, it should have a trigger set up already, and you can hit the button to open the chest, and that's all set up, and it automatically spawns whatever template you put as the loot item. By default, it's a top hat, which I believe is wearable. Let's see.
Yes. That one shows up in, I think, our static player equipment game object as well, just as a demonstration.
Uh-huh. Let's see. Where is our gold pile? Oh, that's right. We turned the gold pile into the hill. foot.
Oh, okay. Here's a question from chat.
Mhm.
Chaz Scholten asks, "I'm new to core. Is it possible to punch or make a hole through the terrain itself? I have a pyramid with dungeon levels below. First of all, welcome to core. I'll let Brendan handle the rest."
Mhm. So you cannot change the terrain in real time in the current version of Core, as far as I know. Um, I, that might be something that we will consider adding in the future, but I think there's a lot of weirdness around the fact that since it's multiplayer, it's a lot more technical. Um, so yeah,
Oh,
so you couldn't really make like a tunneling game that uses our terrain system. Although some people have already started making Minecraft style like games that you can tunnel by just knocking blocks out. But
but I
yes,
think
you
it might
can.
be possible. Oh, well, sorry. I'll let you continue because I
I,
think you're about to say what I'm going to say.
yeah, I think if he's just asking if you can punch holes in the terrain in general, then yes, you absolutely can, because our terrain is all voxel based. So there's no limit as far as overhangs or tunnels or anything like that. So as I was demonstrating earlier, that we were just carving a tunnel out of a big old rock face, and you can just oops. So yeah, you can grab any brush and just start carving, and
Foliage.
yeah, and you can make a hole that goes all the way through. Let's see, yeah, there's the other side there. So yeah, that all is definitely possible. There we go. Okay, let's do a little test of our dungeon here from the outside in. Um, all right, we found the ancient entrance, which still sounds like a sci-fi door. We should fix that at some point. That's going to require some scripting.
Little immersion breaking right
which with only 18 minutes left on the stream, we might not get to that. So, yep. All right, we've got our secret treasure top hat.
there. Perfect.
So yeah, definitely a lot more that we could still do. But we talked about doing some sky customization, which I think would still be fun. So maybe we should move on to that for the next
Oh, heck yes.
17 minutes, and then we can come back to this in the future.
Awesome.
So, yeah, as mentioned at the top of the stream, we have this piece of concept art, which we've kind of been stealing stuff for reference. And yeah, I'm just going to spend some time trying to get this to look a little more like this. And so I'm going to start with our existing sky. I'm not going to start from scratch. I think it'll be easier to just customize what we already have.
Cool.
So definitely the first thing that stands out is the color of the sky dome is quite a bit different. So I'm going to grab the sky dome. These first three color fields here, in addition to the overall tint, control the actual color of the sky. And it's haze, horizon, and zenith. Those are kind of in order from bottom to top, even though they're sorted top to bottom here. I'll move up so you can actually see what is being affected here. So haze color is the bottommost one. Probably want to make this kind of a orange, and you can kind of see that it's coming through there. You also have to consider that our fog is having an impact on this too. So I'm actually going to hide the fog for now, and you can see exactly what we're editing here a little more. So that's why there's only kind of this blue layer here. That's what we're seeing in the fog.
Okay.
But I'm gonna just kind of edit this in a vacuum without that influence, and then we'll kind of figure out how it works itself back in later. So maybe a little more reddish. One of the nice things about editing the sky colors here is that the colors will actually change in real time as you're editing them, which not everything in Core does yet. Hopefully in the future, that will be more of a thing. So,
and then, K-Pop Sim says it would be really nice performance-wise to allow us to erase terrain or set custom size. Are we able to do that right now?
to erase terrain?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was demonstrating how to do it before.
Or set a custom size?
Set a custom size, like when you're importing the terrain? Yeah,
I guess we're generating a new terrain.
yeah. When you generate a new terrain, you set the voxel size and the terrain size here, and both of those will contribute to the actual terrain size. So um, you can do the voxel size. So is basically each individual block, and then this is how many voxels you want. So if we wanted a really huge terrain, we could say make our voxels. No, I guess 10 meters is the highest we can go. Set it to 10, 24, 10, 24. So you're making 10,000 or 1,000 by 1,000 voxels, basically, which makes a 10,000 meter by 10,000 meter terrain. How many meters is a kilometer? 1,000. So
Yes.
that's a 10 by 10 kilometer terrain. So you can definitely change the terrain size. It's true that you probably can't change it after you've generated it. So maybe that's what they're asking. But you can change the voxel size here. I'm scared to do it because I don't know what it will do.
Oh no, I'm scared too.
If it will remove all the edits we've made if we change the voxel size now. Well, we could always save and come back, right? I'm curious. I'm curious. So if we make our voxel size half that size, does it regenerate? Yep, it regenerates the terrain at half size. Oh, and it did keep our edits.
Oh, cool.
So you can.
Some of them don't make sense anymore.
Right. So you can indeed change the scale of your terrain. It's just not as straightforward as grabbing it with the scale tool or whatever.
Yes. So. Great feedback, K-Pop Sim. We've already implemented it.
I learned something.
I hope that helped.
Today I learned something from the chat.
Ooh.
Or learned something that was inspired by the chat. Okay, back to editing our sky. So I'm trying to get this nice kind of dark purple look. So you want to be careful when creating a sky to when people make sunsets and stuff, it's really easy to want to set the sky dome to be this big purple, orange, the kind of colors that you normally associate with a sunset. But typically those colors actually come from the clouds in a sunset. So so I'm going to write, I'm already kind of doing it, and I caught myself just now, which is why I brought it up. I should probably not be using these big saturated colors for what is essentially the background of the big color elements in this reference. So I'm going to drop the saturation and the value quite a bit. Zenith definitely needs to be a lot darker, and a little more on the pink purple side. Oops, that's not what I meant to click on. We'll just load Marmoset really quick. No, it's fine. Yeah, it's actually mostly almost blue with a little hint of kind of a, I don't know, royal lavender. I don't know.
Royal lavender.
I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. I don't know.
Okay. I was like, oh yeah, it is royal.
Yeah. Also seeing, I'm going to turn all the clouds off really quick, just again to let's see if I drop the cloud opacity to 0, and then I'm going to turn off wisps. And it looks like
wisps.
Yeah, and it looks like our high clouds are already off. So yeah. Any more questions?
Nope. But Naya Alchemy says that's neat. And K-Pop Sim says secretly picking colors from Bob Ross's painting. Oh, well, you get that comparison so much.
I know. Agree with it. Yeah, all right. I'll own it. I can be the Bob. I mean, Bob's great.
Yeah, he's cool.
Everybody loves Bob Ross.
Yes.
So, okay. Let's turn our clouds back on. I feel like we've got somewhere with this at least. From ground level, it's probably going to look a lot different because you're not going to see most of the haze. Yeah. Yeah, I actually don't like that for the haze. I want to make the haze, more blue, I think. And we'll get, like I said, we'll get all the color from the clouds instead. Yeah, and now this is going to look a little weird because we're trying to make a night sky, but we've still got a big bright sun. So I'm going to change the sun next really quick, just kind of bring the intensity down quite a bit, and definitely kind of got these nice blue overtones to the ambient lights. I think more of a blue sun probably be or moon. It's probably gonna be moonlight. Will be more correct. Yeah, now it's starting to look a little more in line. This is gonna take. There's a lot of settings we're gonna have to go through before this really feels natural. So we've only got 10 minutes left, so hopefully we can kind of get through them all. Where's
The sky settings kind of overwhelm me.
There are a lot of them, yes. So, and really the best thing you can do is just kind of start clicking through them and just play, you know?
Yeah.
You can turn off the advanced settings. That's always a good start. In fact, I don't think we even need them on right now for what I'm doing right now. Clouds. So let's try and make those clouds that we saw in the image. Try and find something that's close. Definitely not sparse. That's pretty good. Kind of more low to the horizon, poofy clouds. And then, we are going to need advanced settings for this because I want to get deep into the clouds to get the right kind of look. Okay, so overall color is kind of this deep orange, not really deep orange, kind of a mellow orange, which is not going to come through yet, but that's okay. We'll kind of set some colors up and then get back to it. It's interesting because we have the ambient color and we have the cloud color, and they both have a lot of influence. I think the ambient color is kind of more of a cloud tint, whereas the other two colors are kind of like the shadow and lit colors of the clouds. So you can definitely see the rim more when the sun is close to it. So if I change the rim color, like there you can see dramatic effect, like green or something. So the rim color, you probably actually want to be kind of closer to the sun's color. We should also decide we're going to make this a night scene. So I'm going to delete this sun disk, which is kind of the rays around the sun, and I'm going to change the shape of the sun. We have a couple of overlays that kind of fake. Let's see, it's far too bright. Bring the brightness way down, even below 1, I think. Before we'll start to see it. Kind of stuck behind this cloud too. Let me move the sun a little bit.
We'll just remove the sun a little.
The move, not remove.
I was like, oh,
there you go. Just want to get it out in the open. Yes.
Hey Pop Sim says, I really love to blend the sky and terrain using the fog. It gives this smooth, seamless appearance.
Yes. So that is what I will do next. Fog is definitely important. We've talked about this in previous streams.
And I did not know how important
the importance of fog. Yep.
Yeah.
Here you kind of see the moon has a little bit of texture to it now. A little more obvious with that one. Yeah. I think that's probably too blue for our sky or moonlight. Probably just a vaguely tinted white. That kind of matches pretty well. Yeah. So yeah, we're getting somewhere. And the clouds could be a little more saturated. Let's see. I think just, bring up these brightness sliders. Seems to be doing something to them. That kind of washes them out. I don't like that as much. And we can always, of course, overdrive values. That's maybe too much. Maybe that's not the best idea. Let's just go with that for now. It's not quite matching the concept, but we've got a little bit of the idea, at least, of the colors. But let's bring our fog back in, because, yes, that is going to make a big difference. Might not actually need to do a whole lot to the fog. It's kind of got this kind of ghostly, spooky night fog look to it, which I kind of like. But one thing that I definitely, I definitely want to bring down the intensity of the sunlight even more. So it feels, if it's a night scene, it should be kind of dark, not too dark, because we still want it to be playable. And then something I definitely want to play with is the skylight, our kind of ambient shadows. And if you're going to play with the skylight, I really recommend doing this first. If you ever watch like kind of behind the scenes documentaries for movies, occasionally you'll see a guy running around set with these two spheres. and
Oh.
one will be a matte sphere, and the other one will be perfectly reflective, kind of like this. Got our chrome sphere and our matte sphere. And that guy, his specific job is to make sure that the special effects guys, when they come back later and look at that scene, have a good idea of what the lighting setup for that scene was, because this will reflect the lights perfectly, and this will kind of show how the lights are influencing everything in the scene. If you're going to mess with the skylight, I recommend doing that, because this is the only way you're actually going to see the texture that the skylight uses. The skylight actually has what's called a cube map, where, well, let me just change it a couple times and you'll get an idea of what it looks like. So we're seeing a reflection of the cube map that is being used to light the ambient light in the scene, which is going to influence all our shadows. Am I blowing your mind right now, Tasha?
Yes, because I've seen like these in core content before. I think they were in like a utilities thing, and I was like, "What the
Yep.
heck?"
There is, in
Now I
fact,
know.
if you go to utilities, there's this color check palette, which also, that same guy in the movie set, usually he has this as well. And so that they can look at colors and match them to know exactly how they're being influenced by the lighting in the scene.
Okay, because I was like, "This is the world's most boring makeup palette."
Yeah.
I would wear none of these colors.
Yeah.
Okay, but it is for.
Yeah. So,
Now I
anyways,
know.
so just messing with the skylight, you can see already has a big effect on making this feel more natural. Because if you have just this is supposed to be a daytime sphere, this basic blue sky. But you can get a lot of really neat changes in your scorching. Definitely not what we want to use. But yeah, just by tabbing through them, already you get a dramatic change. But this one we know is kind of redder, so it's going to influence all our shadows to be, have this reddish purple tint to them, which I don't think is exactly what we want. But if you're looking for a complementary color, and you do have full color control over this as well. There's a tint color, which kind of is an overlay. So if we want to tint like darker, deeper blue shadows, not very realistic, but has a nice kind of stylized look for sure. You want to be careful, because if you go too dark, it's going to actually tint it black, and then that's basically the same as having no skylight in your scene, which typically not the best look. I would recommend against it.
Oh yeah, that looks terrible.
But thanks.
I'm just looking at the little shiny ball and the little matte one, and they're just like the parts that are in shadow are completely obscured.
Yeah, and you can actually this right now has a blend amount of 0.2 for a different. This is all the same cube maps again, so you can actually kind of customize and make your own cube map by blending two of them together. So there's this other one called Golden Winter Evening, and that's what this one looks like. It's kind of like this ice flow in the Arctic kind of look. And then this is the Starry Night, which is this one. And you can kind of, if you can't find one that matches exactly what you want, then you can kind of mix and match to make your own. So yeah, that's looking okay. It could be better. Unfortunately, we are out of time again, Tasha. It is 3:59, so we're gonna have to come back and work on this more in the future.
Yay! More environment streams with
Brendan. So, anyways, we got some. Yeah, this is probably a little too dim, but that just means more to do, more to play with. So yeah, okay, we did a couple things today.
Thank you so much for coming on, Brandon. And
of course,
I guess I was probably reaching my learning limit for the day, if such a thing is possible.
I
learned so much this stream, and I hope you did too, viewers. And Brendan will return to Core Live to continue showing us environment art tips, tricks, and maybe not best practices, but really good practices. All right, and then we're signing off.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.